You're listening to Enlivening Musings, a podcast to enhance your life so you live fully alive. Sponsored by the Pleasure Fairy app. Download it for more support. Welcome to Enlivening Musings. I'm Crystal.
And I'm Katie.
And today we're going to be talking about connecting with our yonis, womb space, everything in that region. And of course, how that's all connected to our hearts, which is kind of tied in from our last episode. Tied into all of this, though, like what I really wanted to just like get home right away is like the importance of this, like the importance that we are listening to this area of our body. So often we're walking around completely disconnected from everything from our below our waist or anything like that, and how important it is for women to tune into this area and how that, just tuning in allows us to feel more sensations. It allows us to be able to listen to this part of our body before it's something where there's an issue or something going on with that. And it can really amp up our aliveness and knowingness and like connection. There's, a concept out there of just always listening to the yoni, like the yoni never lies about things with, partners, choosing partners, and, just what's going on with it. It's going to tell you it's a gauge. It's a gauge for life, so it can even be helping you with business decisions or whatever it is when we're really connected to it.
Yeah, it's that I always laugh because one of my teachers that taught me about like using hydrosols and stuff like that in pelvic health, she'd always say she knows what she likes. Like she has a nose, so whatever smell you like whether it's rose or lavender or whatever. So I always think of her saying that she knows what she likes,
Yeah.
and it's okay to like trust that. And just how, dropping into that space, it actually makes you like grounded and way more aware. Like you think of when you're like meditating, sometimes you can kind of get like spacey and ungrounded. But like when you're there, you're like everywhere, right? You're like fully on alert, you're very aware, you're grounded, and you're open and safe, like all at once. Like it's just such a deeper sense of like, it's almost like you're moving through the grocery store and the crowds part. Like you're coming through, and that's what I talked about with patients too. I'm like, you've all been around those women that it's like has nothing to do with their weight, their size, what they look like, how they're dressed, and they just like ooze this like sensuality or just like knowingness of who they are, like a confidence. It's hard to even put a word on it, but I think anyone even listening, like you've been around a woman like that you're just like, I want to be like that, or just they're just know themselves. It's awesome to be around.
It's like their own radiance can emanate because they're deeply connected to their essence and their themselves.
Yeah. And even how like we did this exercise a little bit in our last coven call, I think, and like how like, so I've been playing around with it more, like when it feels okay and when it doesn't, and working with that to like be in that space, like around certain people in certain situations, and like just like going head to head with like any uncomfortableness or shame that might come up around that. And just, it's super interesting because no one knows.
Right. Nobody knows
so
where your
interesting.
attention really is, like where it's focused. They don't know if you're sitting there tuning into your yoni, if you're doing a Kegel right now, or if you're tuning into like just your womb space or your heart or whatever it is. And that's one of the things that's fun, like when you do the jade egg or anything, it's like this little secret. It's like, oh yeah, I'm like just kind of feeling that right now. And one of the things that made this really prominent for me lately was just like thinking about the vaginal canal and the reflexology points of the vaginal canal, and how like in this concept of doing Kegels, and how many people out there are like, oh, I want to be able to like be tighter and this and that, and how like tightness is really often more the problem, even when it seems like you have a weak Kegel, because the muscles are so tight that like they can't relax to then have that full functionality of it. And so in thinking, people think about Kegels, and as people have learned, I feel it's evolved, it's not just like tight squeeze and then let go. It's, learning like elevator Kegels or learning these different things, right? So you're learning how to tighten, fine tune, contract, relax, all these different areas through the entire vaginal canal, and how each of those pertain to a different area of our body, which then has different emotions that are held. And so we talk a lot, about how like the heart and the yoni are connected. And so that's huge, because it's like if things can't relax down there, or we're not opening, or we have like a lot of rigidity or whatever it is, a lot of times it can be like, well, let's just first work with our hearts. Let's work here. Let's play with this. Let's see what's there, And sometimes just doing heart work softens and opens and relaxes the entire yoni and the vaginal canal, makes like everything about that area soft and juicier and all of that. But then also, if we look at that in the sense of like each area and everything, and then that's not necessarily connected to the heart. So, like the entrance being like kidney and fear, you think of how many people have a hard time with penetration. And it's like, okay, well, what is all right there? Right in this concept of like being entered, but then going up into the different areas. So like if, like, so I've had this interesting thing, which I've not had very often, but it's like where different areas have been holding tension. And it's not just like right at the entrance. To me, like the entrance is easy because it's like if it's right at the entrance, now I know how to soften that and I can like tune in and soften it. But when it's in these other areas,
That's so interesting, because I was working with someone the other day and it was like, yeah, the entrance was like cool, fine. But it was like, so in like pelvic floor therapy, a lot of times it's like the first knuckle is layer 1, the second knuckle is layer 2, and then the third is like layer 3. So like, yeah, hers was like the second layer. I was like, this is crazy. Like, because so many people, yeah, it's the entrance.
right?
But I was like, whoa, like this is interesting. So please share what you know so we
Well,
can
so
help.
so that second area, that would be more like liver. So that would be like anger, resentments, things like that.
Okay.
And so being able, and just how funny that is when, you look at that. Like I think about like Louise Hay and UTIs are like connected with like anger at a partner, or things like that. And when I think about it for kids, I think they're probably angry at their siblings or parents or something. But I mean, that's just my application of it. But
Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, so like looking at that, and then I think about, whatever season it is, those types of things. And like, is that being activated by that? Or like, what is it? Like, what are we holding on to here? That's like not letting that release. And so that's been something I've been playing with. Um, and I've kind of been like, oh, I should probably like utilize my egg and like do more with it like that. But I haven't done that yet for me personally. I've just been like really focused on where can I breathe into this and when is it happening? Because I notice like different times of day or different things, and if you pull up like a Chinese astrology, not astrology, Chinese medicine wheel, you can get like the times of day. So like what liver, I think, is 1 to 3 a.m.
Yes, because I remember my acupuncture talking about that when my son was waking up at like 3 in the morning. He was like, that's the liver. So I always think
Yeah.
about that. When women are saying they're waking up at like 3 in the morning, I'm like, ooh, your liver.
Yep. So, paying attention to those different things and seeing it. And I mean, it all just ties into just how holistic everything is and how it's all,
Right, because it's
connected.
not ever like the liver is only getting inflamed if the adrenals are totally burnt, right? Isn't that kind of
Well,
what you've said too? Like it's never just one thing, it's like a
right.
sequela of like,
To me, it's the kidneys
or
because
the
the kidneys
kidneys.
get completely depleted. And so then they pull on the energy of the liver.
Okay.
And so it's like, and that's the thing that's interesting about it, like going in there, like the entrance being kidney and
Oh,
then
yeah.
it's like liver. And so it's like excessive fear can then lead into like anger and expressions in that way, you know, and you don't even know that like your anger has been rooted in holding all this excessive fear and ignoring it,
Yeah.
you know?
And then because the cervix is the heart,
Mm-hmm.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that direct line, which also, I mean, we have ways of like how the vagus nerve connects with the pelvic nerves to connect the heart with that. And then also, I never remember the name of that channel in Chinese medicine. Do you remember it? You've talked about it
The
before.
Bao Mai.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that connects the heart to the uterus. And I think too of like the one of the conception vessels that's right on the perineum. You know, that's
Yes.
why that's like to me one of the hidden magical things about steaming that's not talked about in a lot of the um, teachers. You know, they're it's like it's doing all these things, but I'm like, but yeah, it's hitting this acupressure point. Like, who
Mm-hmm.
else is gonna and what else is gonna touch that? Nobody,
Right.
because there's no doctor that's going to sit there and hold that. They're not going to do a needle. They're an acupuncture, right? So who can? A pelvic floor therapist. And
Mm-hmm.
then if you can have access to that vaginal steaming, the steam hits it. And that is why I, to me, that is like why it works. To me, that's like the key, because it harmonizes the whole body and then
Mm-hmm.
things start to heal. And
Yeah.
it can be so simple. I mean, yeah, I just am so amazed so amazed by it. And that's like when you say, like, you talk about those different areas of the vagina and the vulva area, it's like, yeah, like I've said before, I've worked with people where we just work with the energy, not even touching them.
Mm-hmm.
Cause like how,
Mm-hmm.
even for me, like I can say for myself, like how does that energy feel for you to be like in a position knowing someone's about to touch you? What comes up,
Mm-hmm.
right? How many times does that happen, whether it was in relationship or at a doctor's appointment, like you name it. Talk about energy charge in that area for people. It's
All right.
scary.
Absolutely.
That's to me, that is more scary for people than to actually touch them.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of like trust and like knowing like, okay, we're going to be hovering here. We're going to, I want you to be in this space and feel what comes up there,
Right.
if that's like the agreement of what's going on that day. But yeah, it's really, really fascinating, all the different layers. And even like I was telling Crystal, it's so interesting. Like people might start to tell a story that they might kind of just be like, why am I even talking about this? Like it just comes up, and to feel how the pelvic floor will start to like literally be like a vice grip on my finger
Right.
when they start telling a certain story. And I'm like, and they aren't even aware. I'm like, do you feel the tightness coming in as you're talking about that? There's
Mm-hmm.
still something there. It's just so fascinating. Like, I know when I first got into doing pelvic floor work, it's a little intimidating, like those first few people. But now I'm just like, I can't believe I get to work in this realm, because it feels like such uncharted territory. Because there's a small percentage of PTs that are doing pelvic floor work, and most of them are going to be like really clinical. So there's probably even a smaller subset that are doing work that I'm doing. And so it's like this kind of like this new frontier, and it's so amazing and interesting, but also just like awe-inspiring. And sometimes I'm just like, it's hard to put into words. It really is, the experiences people have. And yeah, I don't know. It's just such a magical place. And for people to be able to have a moment where it's like no expectations and it's non-sexualized, like I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
big thing I always
Mm-hmm.
want to come back to when we talk about this. Like it's not all about sex. Like none of it is. I feel like 90% of it can be not about sex, like intercourse
Right.
sex. Like there's so much healing around it that needs to happen around that. And like just the shame, it's like, because that's the expectation of that space. Like it's just mind blowing. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, I'll let Crystal
Yeah,
talk a little bit.
yeah. No, I love all that. I feel like I have a million things to say from all of that. Like, one, when you're saying that, I had an interesting conversation with my almost 10-year-old about just even terminology. Like, she's like, I don't know. Sometimes when people call the yoni the vagina, I'm like, eh. And I'm like, well, maybe it's because they really should be saying vulva.
Mm-hmm.
And like breaking that down. And so then we had a conversation around that, and just even saying, this is another part of your body, just like these are my thumbs and this is my nose. And
Mm-hmm.
it's an important part, and it's an important part that we need to be able to talk about and use correct words. And it's also an important part to stay connected to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, yeah, just with the terminology and being able to know what we're like saying and feeling. And then that connection, that was the part that when you're talking about like telling a story and not even noticing that they're contracting, and it's like that's what this whole podcast is about, is like inviting you into tuning into that area more. And it can be, if you want to do a challenge where for the next 7 days you're either listening to just like your womb space, if you're feeling, if you're having connections to like your uterus and your womb space and that whole just lower pelvic region, or listening to your actual yoni. See how often you might even feel your pulse there. You can feel your pulse in that area. And that's why when we do like the heart yoni connections or heart genital connections, you can feel how each pulse, are they in harmony? Are they not in harmony? Um, but then paying attention to that when you're doing things like that, and just in that like physical for yourself movement, like there's different stretches you can do that like elongate the inside of the vaginal canal. And there's different things, where it's like maybe it feels short and constricted. And so just like seeing that throughout your day, when you're having this conversation, when you're listening to this thing, when you're watching this show, when you're experiencing, because there's so much input that happens. And so like, how is this part of your body responding? So you could do a challenge, pay attention only to that,
Mm-hmm.
for the next 7 days, and just see what happens, see what comes up. And then, of course, if you want to take that into like a deeper dive, then playing with like those different sections as you're tightening it. And that's like a great thing to do then if you do have like a wand or your own finger. Your own finger's so great because
Yeah.
you get the tactile sensation, on both sides. So you can feel what's happening. Um, and also, of course, the caveat of don't beat yourself up if you can't segregate different
Oh,
parts either, because that is also something that takes a ton of practice. So there's that. But more so in the realm of if you're noticing certain areas are easier or certain areas are holding this tension, like just, it's all just about that awareness and that paying
right.
attention.
Yeah, just be curious.
Yeah.
And just to be, yeah, it's just the awareness. I think where a lot of times we get blocked, myself included, is trying to intellectualize and
Mm.
figure it out. And that is not always what needs to be done.
Yeah, it's reminding me of
It's just feeling it and just being like, that's interesting. Just be curious. Oh, it's tender there.
right, exactly. And you could do entire like vulva massage even at this point. Like, feel the different sides of your lips. Feel like if one side is more sensitive than the other. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, for so many people I know, like even the concept of doing that is just like, is that okay? Like
mm.
take it back because I know like Crystal's like kind of can be on the other end of the spectrum, which I love because she's someone to like look up to with her ability. But
Just go do
I'm
it.
taking it back like all the way to people like that's not even okay.
Right.
Right? They don't even know. Like I give them home program of like I just want you to take some oil and just massage yourself every day. That's
Mm-hmm.
okay to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a lot of people that isn't.
Right.
So like even if that is like where your barrier's at, sometimes I tell people, you can just over your clothes or over your underwear, just start to feel along the opening or right on the perineum. See if it's tight, to see if you can feel it move while you're breathing, right? Or have a partner help you. Like, so it's okay, like wherever you are at. Like someone I was listening to and I love it. She was like, go at the pace that feels good to you. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that. At a pace that feels good to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you rush it, it's not going to do any good
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
just bypassing stuff.
Right.
And even, I mean, gosh, dialing it back to even like what is taught in like a true Jade Egg Essentials of like that the vaginal opening is meant to open, flower open, and pull something in.
Mm-hmm.
When I heard that and when I share that to other women, like their minds are so blown.
I
I've never had
know.
one person I've shared that with that was like, oh, yeah, I get that. That's how I do it. You
Right.
know, everyone's
All the
just like,
time, I'm only drawing in my partner or my toy or my finger.
right.
Yeah.
Like,
They're never
how,
pushing into me.
yeah, how is that like never, how is that not known? You know, like that's
Right.
the way it's supposed to be and how much that changes everything
Mm-hmm.
and reminds us as women like of our power and not in a bad way. Like, this is like us being in our own selves and control and like just the, I don't know, power seems like the wrong word, but just like so much that we hold there, right? It's such like a gift of what's creation of
Yeah, I mean,
everything.
I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
It's like the most potent place,
Yeah.
All
And
of
like,
life creation can come from this place.
oh, I know. There's just like so much I'm feeling like it's such a deep level of needing to be like undone and rewritten
Mm-hmm.
and healed for women. And yeah, not to go into like, oh, heal women, all this stuff, but it's so deep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I just hope we can all get there together. And we need each other. We need each
Yeah.
other to do this work and support each other no matter where you're at, is finding that person that can just meet you right there and accept where you're at without creating another layer of shame. Because I felt that
Right.
too, where you're like way at like a 0 and they're at a 10. And so you're just like, something's wrong with me. Or this like, yeah, all the bad stuff gets layered. So like wherever you are at, like it's totally okay.
Right. And being there and like you're not comparing yourself to other women, you're just comparing yourself to your own trajectory,
Yeah.
your own desires, your own path, and like what you want
Yeah.
and where you want to go with it.
Yeah, because that's like the only way I think is just for us as women to keep like sharing these things and just like a lot of this stuff is meant to be shared in like quiet spaces, dark
Yeah.
rooms where we whisper it to each other and then share it with our daughters because it's not that it's shameful and needs to be in the dark, but it's sacred,
Right.
and it needs to be held in such like a loving, safe thing and keep it that way. I know there's like some people that are just like, oh, take back the word and like all this stuff and can almost get kind of like on almost like a vulgar end of it, like to the point of almost like taking back their sexuality into a point of like exploitation, it almost feels like. And, that's an interesting place where I'm kind of like curious too, because I feel like it can be fully embodied and like in such like a safe, like still modest, like it's still yours. Like we've talked about this too, like
Hmm.
just the mindset of women saying like, well, I've had a baby, so like it's all, whatever, everyone's seen it. But in truth, their heart doesn't feel that way. It's still a sacred, special place, not meant for everybody. And
Right.
only people that are allowed there are allowed there. So it's just, there's such a spectrum of, there's so many things, is what I'm trying to say. So
Right. And
many
so it's
things.
like it's all about again your individual where you're at.
Yes.
Like and there's no shame in any of it. If you're the type of
Right.
person who's like, "Yes, I enjoy bearing it all and I have no modesty and I don't want that," then that's cool. And
Yes.
if you're on the other end, then that's cool. If you're
Yes.
somewhere in between, then that's cool. And all of it. Like it's just
Be your own. Yeah. Don't feel like you have to be one way or another.
right. And like honoring that. And again, that connection to this area helps you know that about yourself.
Yeah.
It helps you know where are your boundaries, what feels good to you, what do you want to invite into your space. When you talk about just like the jade egg essentials, it reminds me even of just, like you start out by just carrying the egg around with you.
Hmm.
And it's like
Like in your hand or in your
or in your
pocket.
pocket. And so I remember the first time I did that, I was like, I didn't want it to go anywhere negative.
Hmm.
Like I'd walk into a spot where people were arguing and I'm like, not going in there. And like and then I'm sitting here going, but I put my entire body and being in that.
Hmm.
Here I don't want to bring the stone near that, but like I'll put me there.
Yeah.
you know? And now obviously I'm in control of filtering my own energy and this and that and whatever, but it's like it was fascinating to
It's
me
really interesting.
to
Yeah.
think about that. And then tied into that is part of it was because I didn't want the egg to feel those energies that then I'm going to then put that inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, like, I mean, now I'm kind of going off on like this whole other world, but your boundaries and everything, that's the point of all of this. Get really clear when you're really honoring and listening to this part of your body and when you're connecting it with your heart and you're doing all of that stuff. And so you can just kind of tune in and do all of that. And I wanted to throw in just one other practice too, which is going to be another one that's kind of borderline pushing an edge for a lot of people. And so, again, honor and respect where you're at with it, but utilizing a mirror
Mm-hmm.
and looking at yourself too. That is huge. I've, once upon a time heard about how the way that you feel about your genitals is the way you feel about yourself. And so it's like if you're looking at that and you're like, oh, it's ugly, it's weird, it's whatever. Well, what are you feeling about yourself? Do you feel that way? Do you look at like things and you're like, oh, it's so pretty, it's so great? Or do you look at it like, huh, this is kind of interesting?
Mm.
Whatever it is. But that's like another neat practice to get to know what this is like and what,
Yeah.
you're
And
sharing with the world.
I think with that, it reminds me of like certain types of mirror work where, they'll teach like, and if it feels like too much to be like fully exposing yourself in front of the mirror, maybe it's like, with something on that you like,
Mm-hmm.
right? And because if it feels like too much, right, you're going past your own boundary.
That edge, you're pushing it too far,
So
right?
I liked that idea of like maybe you like have on some underwear or like maybe there's a scarf or like maybe you're in like just whatever it is. Like I think that can be a really cool way to start to approach it to people or even starting to just like nurture that part of your body more, right? Maybe use like
Mm-hmm.
a body oil, just like you would like put makeup on your face, like what do you do to that part of your body to love on it and make it
Right,
feel beautiful, right? I just think
exactly.
that that can be a really cool practice. We've talked about this in other episodes about like the way we respond and to ourselves is the way like our partner will respond to us, and so like how nurturing that area can just put out a whole different vibe into the universe too. So lots
Exactly.
of different practices.
I love it. So, cheers
Yeah,
on
I would love to know too
exploration.
if any of you have like different practices you do. Like we'd love to hear it, and or if you want more specific tips from us, like just reach out. We're happy
Yeah.
to share. We're both pretty much open books.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, here's to your vibrancy and soaking up all the love, especially for this part and tuning into this part of your body.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like more support, hop on the Pleasure Fairy app or find Katie at wellnesswithkatie.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Enlivening Musings if you want to share some takeaways or other requests for future shows. Enjoy.